We have so many stories in our lives, but our stories are not always heard. On the Hear My True Story podcast, we tell our own true stories.
Before the white car backed, our head teacher had scattered. Looking at him, I could only see his tie that was flying backwards, waving at us, and he disappeared in thin air.
I want to share my life story. I want to share my voice with the people because I know that just a small joke I can tell through this podcast, it will make someone smile.
When you ask me what I fear most in life, I would definitely respond to you and say it's fear itself.
We are fighting for togetherness. We are fighting for equal rights. We are fighting to end injustice.
You don't have to be a storyteller or writer because, guess what? Life writes the best stories.
Hear my true story.
This is your favorite time of the week with your number one podcast.
Hear my true story.
I have started recording. Please, our dear listeners, let me start this again. Welcome again to our podcast, Hear My True Story. It is me, your host, Otako, and I'd like to say...
Welcome to a brand new episode. Hear my true story.
Yeah, our dear listeners, guess what? I started a podcast without recording. And now I want to ask our guest again. Could you please again introduce yourself? I was not recording. I don't know how it happened, but I was not recording.
Of course, with a lot of joy, Otaku. I'm so happy to be here with you. And of course, I like to present myself again. My name is Kathrin Goosses. But you always call me Kathi, and I think it's the right name for me. And you asked me about what I do. So I'm a theater pedagogue, which means that I am a theater practitioner, and I'm working mainly with young people, young adults, people who are interested in theater but are not professional theater makers. Always questioning the word professional theater maker, because anyone can do theater, and that's the main purpose of my work. Also, I'm currently working in a theater which is called Schlossplatztheater in Berlin. And I'm organizing projects, I'm organizing long-term projects for young people and short-time projects in schools, and also international exchange projects, for example, currently with a group in Italy. That's mainly my everyday work. And I'm also involved in an organization called IDEA, International Drama and Education Association, and organizing over there together with my colleague Nefeli Angeloglu, the Young IDEA meetings, which is called Meetings for Young Theater Practitioners all over the world. IDEA, I have to say, is an organization that is trying to strengthen theater work in education all over the world. And we organize meetings with young practitioners who are interested in an exchange.
And when you talk about young people, you're working with young people there in Berlin, and then you are working with young people globally with IDEA. Why do you always choose young people? I mean, what is your story? Why young people?
It's actually not really true. I know I just said it. So in my theater, the main people who come there and who are willing to play and to get to know theater are young people between 6 and 19 years old. So that's what I mainly do in everyday life. Young people are for me, of course, always a treasure of ideas, of energy, and of really artistic and beautiful stories that come out of them, like without stopping. But I also worked with older people in other contexts. So I also gave workshops for people over 60 years old. So I would not like to stop my the purpose of theater pedagogy in any age. I think it can be beautiful for anyone in any state of their life.
Oh, yeah, that is true. Because the theater really makes it, heals someone from the, me when I'm stressed, I just like to go and tell my personal stories and I get back to really, this is the reason why I am part of this podcast, because I like sharing my personal stories, telling stories, experiences. Yeah. So for the listeners who are just joining us in this episode, please listen to the previous episode with Kathi. She talked more about young idea, and now we are continuing with the conversation again. So, Kathi, in your leadership of young idea, what are some of your experiences as the leader on a team, as the co-director? What are some of the experiences that you find, that someone should always consider to be part of a global network, and as a leader that they should always have in mind?
I don't like to call myself a leader. I'm always trying to facilitate, to get people together. And then as soon as they go together, I like to separate the leadership in everyone who is there, which, by the way, worked really well in the last Young Idea meeting. But of course, leader means to do the boring work. So we organize, for example, the fundings for Young Idea meetings. My colleague Nefeli worked so much in the last month to think about the accommodation, the money we need for food, all the organizational stuff inside the big network, the finance plan, and so on. So leadership maybe means thinking about everything you need to do and giving propositions to the group of participants what we could do. But of course, if anyone wants to get involved in this work of Young Idea, we would never say stop, and we would always listen to engaged people who want to be part-time leaders with us together and organize the next meetings with us.
Okay. Then you talked about in the previous episode how the colonial aspect is really playing big part in really doing these activities that you do globally between global north, global south, and other, Africa, Asia, Europe. And then you talked about how more of the leadership is here in Europe for Young Idea, mainly in Yemen. Yeah.
Yes. This is a problem we have in the world, I guess. It's a problem that is historical. It has been growing historically, and is part of the world we live in. There are inequalities in any international network, I guess, between the possibilities people have to travel, between the money people can access to. Also, of course, other questions as education and the simple question of visa. Can I travel? Am I allowed to travel to a certain country or not? And who is actually deciding if I can do it or not? So, of course, as people who are privileged and white, traveling is always easier than for other people. And we of course feel this in our work. So we always try to be really aware of this. We always try to find ways to make these inequalities smaller, but we always get in touch with them, and we always have to react to them. So maybe I can give an example. We have met the last time for the Young Idea meeting took place in Iceland, in Reykjavik. And for some people, the travel costs were lower, of course, because they were closer. And for some people, the travel costs were really high because they were coming from far away. But then also, for the people who came from far away, the money that would cost the flight was a lot more than it would have been for me, for example. So we could not meet. And this is one of the problems we have. If we would have endless money, we could do an international meeting maybe that is a lot more diverse. But with the possibilities we have, we always get to this point where people cannot travel.
I mean, you talked about when you talk, colonial perspective is there so much between these collaborations. You talked about visas. Do you have any personal experience as a co-director of Young Idea dealing and organizing these exchanges?
Yes, we have. We actually had a meeting in Lomé in 2020, like in January 2020, with a group of people from mainly Germany and Togo, but also from the Netherlands, France, and Peru. And we at the end of our last meeting, we decided, okay, the next meeting will be organized by a group of Togolese students that is willing to organize our next meeting in another country, which would be Iceland. So this was our starting point. And then we had a long process it was over a year, long process of trying to find ways to work together. First problem was we didn't have good internet connections to talk to each other and to plan the next meeting. Second problem was the money was still coming from Europe. Then the group of Togolese students got smaller and smaller, also because they were not yet organized in an association, so they didn't have a strong background organizations behind them. And then we organized the next meeting in Iceland, mainly again people from the older group, from people from Germany, and we met there, and we found fundings to finance one flight from Togo to Iceland, which was, I think, almost 2,800 euros. 1,800 euros, and the person who was representing this whole group of really involved Togolese theater practitioners, and who really was also representing another association over there and really was interested to come, didn't get a visum. And the funny fact about this, even though it's not funny at all, but it was the French embassy who decided that the person would not get a visum. So I was asking myself, why? If a person from Togo wants to travel to Iceland, why the hell the French embassy is deciding whether the person is trustable or not? So I guess there we get really fast to the question of colonialism.
Yeah, because Togo was colonized by France.
It was actually colonized by Germany.
But then given out to France?
And then the administrations was given to France, but it's just another way, I think, to it's you could call it colonial.
That was after the German lost the First World War. Then Britain and France took most of the territories of German and they governed them. Of course, they ended up being colonies, as the way you said. It is so interesting that the French embassy decides for someone who's going to Iceland to get a visa.
That was really crazy.
Didn't you feel really pissed about this whole ideal of visas? How easy it would be for someone from France to go to Togo than someone from Togo to come to Iceland.
So I was really pissed, but I think the person who was planning to come had a lot more emotions about that, and I think it would be interesting that you maybe talk to him one day and invite him to the podcast to talk about this topic.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it was a long process, but it was not only him who was really shocked about the situation. It was actually the whole group of young idea participants. And there, I think we in the last meeting in Iceland, we could feel a really interesting and nice international solidarity in the group. Everyone was waiting, and then everyone got the bad news, and everyone was emotional about it in the whole international Young Idea Lab group.
And what was the reasons for the denial of the visa?
There were 3 reasons called. One reason was the French embassy didn't think that the person could pay their accommodation costs and food costs in Iceland, which was not true at all, because the association in Iceland organized everything and also sent trustable papers to the embassy that showed and proved that the stay was organized and paid. There is.
You can open the door.
Yeah, can I?
Yeah.
Sorry. I think it's a package.
No problem. You can really open the door, and then when you come back, we continue.
Make sure to follow us on Twitter. Hear my true story.
Our dear listeners, you can follow us on Twitter, Hear My True Story. You can follow us on YouTube, Hear My True Story. Yes, Kati was picking a package. Wow, nice. It's good that you got your package. So my question was what were the reasons that were given to deny someone a visa?
Yes, so I start again what I just said. So one thing was that the person was not trusted to be able to finance their stay in Iceland by the French embassy, but which was not at all true, because the Icelandic organization
provided all the costs and also sent a proof to their embassy that the costs would have been taken by IDEA and Young IDEA. The second reason was that the French embassy didn't trust that the person would come back to Togo. They said it is possible the person would, I don't know what they imagine, on an island like Iceland, but run away and don't travel back. And then I think another reason was they said that some papers were missing, but this I don't know so much about this. So they gave at least two reasons that we could not understand. We already bought the flight, so the money was, or parts of the money were lost, and he did have a proof of everything he needed. Yes, and it was a hard work to get all organized, the flights, organized the stay, organized the visum papers. And he was not the only person of the group that had a lot of difficulties to get a visum. There was also a person from China who organized, who had to send, I think, 28 papers or proofs for this day. So a long list of proofs. So that is why other people could also understand the situation. And we actually, as a group, we decided to include those experiences we did with the embassy and visa problems in our performance and talk about it during the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is really a bit the result of pre-colonialism that is really happening, that happens up to date. The neo-colonialism that is still happening. You can't imagine. It was in 2012 when I was having a project in Burkina Faso, that's in Africa. And fortunately for me, from Uganda to travel to Burkina Faso, I needed to get the visa from the French embassy. Can you imagine that someone traveling in your continent of Africa as an African from Uganda going to Burkina Faso, you need to get a visa that allows you to go to Burkina Faso through the French embassy?
This is really crazy. This is really crazy. You talked about it before, and
yeah, I mean,
we were actually laughing out of shock when you first talked me about this situation you had.
It is quite interesting that we as artists, we experience this kind of colonialism that is still happening. Yeah. When someone needs to travel in a continent of Africa to get a visa from a French embassy. I mean, if there's any person from the French embassy listening to this podcast, or maybe there's any French person listening to this, a European, you really get shocked that I need to come to a country in Africa. From Africa, I get a visa in the French embassy. So shocking.
Yes.
Yeah, and annoying.
Yeah, and it shows us that structures are still in their colonial contexts in many countries. So.
And isn't this also reflected in the funding? How fundings are given out to?
Can you repeat the question?
I mean, like this kind of colonialism, don't you think it plays a very big part in the funding? How countries like France would fund a project that is moving from France to the global south to take their cultural practices there, than when someone is coming from Togo, coming to maybe France.
Mm-hmm. I think, yes. I think the financial structures, I mean, neo-colonialism is mainly working through finances, isn't it?
Yep.
So I think there are many many ways you could analyze the structure of finances in connection to colonialism and neocolonialism. So we could start to collect, and I think we would find 15 or 20 different ways of how this is connected to colonialism. I think one topic is if German people go to for example to Togo, they get a funding, but actually also German people could finance people from Togo coming to Germany. This I have to say, it's working, but the money is still German. So who is the one who decides how the exchange will take place, for example? Who is the one who knows about all the things we need to prove and how we need to work, all the application papers. If you write application paper for a funding, of course you have a plan how the meeting will take place, and of course with this plan you got in your during your working time, the plan you worked out maybe also with another person, but it's always the responsibility will always be more on the person who has organized the money. So I think this is a problem for international co-work, that if the money comes from one side, the people have more power also in the decision of the input and the work they do in general.
So that then brings me a question. How do you people in IDEA reflect on this colonial aspect so that your power is not reflected because I'm sure someone from Togo or someone from Uganda and is having a project in IDEA and the funding is coming from Germany. So really, how do you believe in balancing the status quo of the association?
It's a good question, because it always depends on the awareness of the people who are doing it. So in our group of students, we always tried to work on the reflection of the colonial context, in context of our work, or of the colonial, how do you call the word? Yeah, like
colonialism,
input,
colonial aspect.
Aspects, in our work. And I think we are not finished. We still have to learn a lot. I think, we are theater makers and we are not professionals in the field of, I don't know, political international politics or something like that. So we always try to reflect and we did experiences, and the experiences were not always good experiences. So we try to learn from the experiences we got, and always questioning ourselves and our work also. So I think that's the main thing we can and have to do, is always questioning what we do, and always trying to also find people who are willing to discuss with us, and people who are who can give their voice to make it more equal. So what we did was we did the first exchange in Togo. We made the first experiences of things that didn't work out, and we reflected them in a publication we did after the meeting in Togo. We also had many discussions among each other with the Togolese group. And in the publication, we have, for example, a text from students from Germany, texts from students from Lomé, from Togo, and always also text from our from our interviews and discussions we had with each other on those topics.
But do you think you can separate global politics from the global artist organization collaborations?
No, of course not. I think you can never separate it. I just wanted to say some people have maybe studied something or worked a lot in the field of international work, always thinking about or learned a lot about the neocolonialistic structures. But we don't have to forget that we are artists and we are not professional in those fields, and we have to still have to handle them and still have to learn about it. So yeah, I think we could be a lot better if we would not be artists, but we are artists, and we have to have to do it besides the rest of the work we do. I don't know if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, personally, I can really understand what you mean, but I don't know about the listeners. Maybe they will also understand what you mean. Yeah.
I mean, theater work is always political work. That's something you cannot talk about a topic without having a political meaning inside of the topic. Even though you don't want to talk about politics will be inside. Even if you ignore it, it's your way of expressing it. So yeah, but we are not specialists in how do you call them? International politics, for
international
example.
Politics. Yeah, I get that, but I understand your point very well, as me myself, and so then that brings me to another question. You are a German white person. Do you think it's really a good thing someone to understand their white privilege, and can they really use them in such collaboration with Global South and the Global North?
To use the white privilege, good question. I'm not sure if you use it. I mean, you use it, or you always use it. Also, if you say you don't use it, it's always there. I mean, what we can do is provide money and try to not be the one who decides what to do with it. Maybe that would be possible, but it's really difficult, because if you are responsible for something, it's really difficult to let it do someone else. No, I don't know. Maybe I'm lost now.
There's no problem. And of course, you don't need to answer that. If you can't answer it, you don't have to answer that. It was just a question.
It's an interesting question to think about, how to use the white privilege you have to make something possible that is distributing power more. So maybe if I think about it now, one of the best things would be something that you already know about, also, like sharing power in any position that you are. So, for example, the co-directorships, the idea of co-directing is always a way of sharing power, even though we don't have to think that the power is shared equally, because that's white privilege, that it's always there. But if we can find a way to distribute who is taking decisions in a diverse group, then we would maybe be possible to use the power we have. I don't know if this is it's just a thought. Maybe this is another discussion I would really love to have with many people.
Yeah, I understand. This is really another discussion on another thing, but because I was doing collaborations and doing exchange programs, you cannot fail to meet issues like colonial power aspects, neo-colonialism happening. As me, Otako myself, I was really given a hard time during my world tours. Most of the times, getting visas, stopped at airports, staying in the queue longer than anyone, because I was in a world tour where we had people from Hong Kong, Thailand, Bangladesh, India, then France, and I was from Uganda. And most of the times, I was the last person to leave the queue on borders, crossing borders. People could always put me aside and question me, why am I traveling? What am I going to do there? Why am I having this visa? How long am I planning to stay? Which is different from someone from France would just cross right eye. Someone from Hong Kong would just cross the border quicker than someone from Uganda. So there was also balance, and I was the only black person. So it was also playing a very big role, So I think with my experience, I think as someone knowing the information about their privilege as white people can be good in such collaborations, to be informed about the privilege, and also to use your privilege for other people to use that space that supports them positively. That's what I think. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. So you have done many collaborations and tours. Yeah, that's according from the conversation we had. If I want to do a tour or a collaboration, what would you advise me as someone who wants to do something like that? What would you advise me to do? Or for anyone listening would like to do a tour or a collaboration, what advice would you give them to consider before doing Global North and Global South?
I think find a partner. Anywhere, if you do an international collaboration, you need a strong partner in another country, because you need a person that is sharing power with you and sharing decisions with you, and maybe finding also their own finances, or giving new perspectives to your ideas. And if you are able to find a strong partner somewhere who is carrying all the program ideas and also the decisions with you, then the co-working will be a lot more easy in an international context. But this also means you have to get to know someone really well before, because you need to trust each other. So before starting a collaboration project, I think it takes a long time to find a partner that could be your strong collaboration partner. Maybe that means traveling, getting to know people, getting to know their work, see what other people do, and not only concentrate on your own work. It means going somewhere before the actual meeting, and see what the other people do, to be more open, and to know also who is maybe able to do that work together with you.
Okay, that's a real good advice, because I've seen people doing collaborations and they don't have partners in the countries they collaborate with. They find difficulties in realizing their goals of the project.
Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, the experiences I did I did some of them now, were also that we thought we have a partner who would take responsibility, and at the end they didn't. So this also can happen, and this is also part of it. So you always, it needs time to create a strong collaboration between people.
I really get that. It means you need to have funding to realize that.
Yeah, funding and friendship.
So for the audience, I would just like to ask you: is there anything that you would like to talk about that we maybe have forgotten to talk about? You can share with the listeners.
I think no. I think the most interesting thing then would be for maybe also the other listeners to hear all the voices from the people who were part of our last meetings, and to hear different perspectives, because this is what we do. We have diverse perspectives in our network, and my perspective is only one. So next interesting point would be to hear more people.
Yeah, I mean, on our podcast, I'm hoping to really having more people from Young Idea, maybe also the Big Idea, to hear their personal stories. I mean, why are they part of such a big network? And if I can have the presidents of the Big Idea, maybe get the other young people from Togo, maybe from Uganda, maybe those who are coming from other parts of the world, Peru,
Yes.
to hear their views about Young Idea and how it works in their country.
I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, I look forward to that, to get the contacts.
Yes, we will connect you to all those who want to talk about their experiences.
Yeah, thank you so much for that offer. Yeah, because of time and it's really too late right now, I just want to ask you maybe to say your last words, any statements, any call for people who are listening.
Last word, so maybe just to say you are always welcome to join us, contact us. I think Otaku will put all our contacts in the podcast, and if you are willing to do such exchanges, there is always a possibility, and we are really interested in your work and your perspectives.
Yeah, thank you so much. Our dear listeners, I would like to say bye for now, but it was such a wonderful podcast to have you listening up to the end of our wonderful conversation with Kati from Young Idea, also a theater pedagogue and also an artist. Yeah, we are happy that you gave us your time, and we can always continue conversing on this wonderful podcast with you.
We not only have voices for a podcast, but also faces for YouTube. Don't miss your next episode. Hear my true story.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Music by Edwin Matovo, hosted and produced by Otaku. Subscribe to our podcast for more stories and visit us on our website, hearmytruestory.com, for more stories. All the links are listed in the show notes of this podcast.